Very good afternoon. This is Transfer Talk. It's been a whirlwind 24 hours for Eberechi Eze. We'll have in-depth analysis on a move that has rocked North London. Arsenal have agreed a £67.5 million deal with Crystal Palace for Eze, and he could have a medical as soon as tomorrow. Well, where does this leave Thomas Frank and Tottenham then, after missing out on Morgan Gibbs-White and now Eze as well? We'll discuss their options as well. And Enzo Maresca has just dropped a big update on the future of Nicholas Jackson. We will bring you all the latest as we're live to Chelsea. A very good afternoon to you at home, and to former Newcastle and Republic of Ireland midfielder Jeff Hendrick joins us, and our chief correspondent Kaveh Solokul is here as well. Just some breaking news to bring you first of all, and that's that Leeds United have completed the signing of forward Noah Okafor from AC Milan in a deal worth £18 million. Right, let's get on to the transfer then, which has got plenty of people talking, and that is Ebere Eze to Arsenal. But Kaveh, this time yesterday, no one was talking about Eze going to Arsenal. It was going to North London rival Spurs. So what has happened in these last few hours for us to be in this situation where we are right now? Well,
look, what happened yesterday is that Spurs agreed a deal with Crystal Palace for Eberechi Eze. They also agreed personal terms with his representatives, and he was happy to move to Spurs. The only thing that held up the deal being completed was Crystal Palace saying, hang on a second, we've got this important European playoff game Thursday night. We want Eze to play in that game. Let's wait until that game is out of the way before completing this deal. Now, that gave Arsenal the chance to make a late move for the player. And I think Arsenal were aware of the fact that the player is an Arsenal supporter. He used to be at Arsenal until he was 13. And so when they got in touch with Crystal Palace were happy to do the deal with Arsenal as well, because it was exactly the same terms as Spurs. And also, when they got in touch with the players' representatives told them that the player would prefer to move to Arsenal. So that is what happened yesterday. I think from Spurs' perspective, what more could they have done? They agreed a deal with Crystal Palace. They agreed a deal with the player. It's just that the player, at the last minute, for emotional reasons, because he's an Arsenal supporter, has decided to go to Arsenal instead of Spurs.
Jeff, this is interesting from a player's perspective, because like Kaveh says, Eze is a boyhood Arsenal fan. He played in their academy. But as a player, when you start playing professional football, do those affiliations for your club that you were a fan of when you were younger, do they come into it? Do you care where you go because of the team you supported? How does it work in your brains?
For me, it wouldn't have mattered really. You'd sort of pick the club that's most suited to you and where you'll probably grow and have better opportunities. But, you know, for Eze, he was at the club for so many years. Like you said, he supports them. There probably was that pull for him and his family. Maybe if the deal had been done a few days earlier, he wouldn't have had that chance to go to Arsenal. But, you know, it looks that way that he'll get to go to his boyhood club.
We were talking on Good Morning Transfers a little bit earlier on, and sort of just asking the question, you know, how much closer does Eze signing for Arsenal put them to the Premier League title? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, obviously, you know, it strengthens their squad. Definitely, he's a fantastic player. I think everybody thinks that, and he's going to help the squad certainly. But for me, if it makes them any closer, it depends sort of how you use them.
How do you think Arsenal are going to use him then?
Yeah, well, for me, obviously, you know, in that 10 position, he's a fantastic player, but you know, the captain plays there, so are they going to maybe try and play him a little bit out of position on the left? Who knows, but he'll definitely strengthen the squad for sure.
Kaveh, when you look at that Arsenal squad, obviously Kai Havertz is injured. You know, Eze isn't a direct replacement for Kai Havertz in a number 9 position, so they do really only have Victor Gyökeres in that position. With Eze now signing for Arsenal, do you think they're going to dip into the market for another player? And if so, where's that money coming from?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, maybe they would like to bring in another striker. Maybe they'll look at the loan market. I think that is something they've been looking at. But when you look at the business they've done this summer, you have to think, surely there's going to come a point where the owners are going to say, look, enough's enough. We have invested a lot of money in the transfer market. You know, we've really pushed the boat out. We pushed the boat out again with Eze as well. I'm not sure whether there's big money to spend on another striker. What's interesting to me about this sort of so-called hijacking is how clever Arsenal have been. Because what they've effectively done is everyone knows they're interested in Eze, but as a club, especially for a big club, and Liverpool do this a lot as well, you don't want to get involved in an auction for a player. You don't want to get involved in a bidding war. So have Arsenal just sat back and let Spurs do all the hard work. Let Spurs do all the negotiating, thrash out a deal with Steve Parish at Crystal Palace, and then at last minute, just made that phone call, safe in the knowledge that they know all along that the player would prefer to come to Arsenal. Is that what's happened? I think probably. Also, we shouldn't forget about the Kai Havertz factor. The fact that he came on Sunday, he was injured. We don't know how serious that injury is, but obviously Mikel Arteta doesn't want to be in the position that he was in last season, where, for instance, Mikel Merino was playing up front. He did a great job, but Arsenal, if they're going to win the title, they need a stronger squad, and that's one of the reasons they signed Eze.
Yeah, so Arsenal close to signing Eze, but it is expected that he will play in Crystal Palace's playoff in the Conference League tonight. Now, he obviously won't want to get injured, and there's plenty of examples, Jeff, of players, you know, not wanting to play for their clubs before they're making a big move. Jeff Hendrick, for example. Slightly different situations, we must say. Explain what happened in your situation, and are you surprised that Eze, you know, might step out on the pitch for Palace tonight?
Yeah, for me, obviously, my situation was COVID came along and contracts ran out, and there was a time limit to get them sorted. I wasn't on my own, by the way. I think there was four of us.
You're going to chuck some others under the bus as well, yeah?
There was four of us, but yeah, we just sort of, you know, ran out of time with the situation. But for me, if he plays tonight, it is quite risky, mainly for Crystal Palace, really. You know, they're looking at big money here, and they're probably looking to bring in other players. If he gets injured, it might put the deal off completely. So who knows? Arsenal might be okay with him playing. I'd say preferably they don't want them to play, and they'd want them coming in fresh.
Who's it more of a risk for, Eze playing tonight? Is it more of a risk for Eze, or is it more of a risk for Palace?
In a way, if I was a Palace fan, I would think, let's hope he plays tonight, scores a couple of goals, and then maybe picks up just a little niggling injury that would sort of, you know, ruin his chances of moving to Arsenal, so we could keep him. But obviously, I don't want to wish a player getting injured. But it is strange to see that he might play this evening. But Oliver Glasner was very clear in his news conference yesterday. He looked at all us journalists and said, look, some of you weren't expecting him or Mark Gahey to play on Sunday against Chelsea, and he did. And those two may well play again tonight. This is a really important game for Crystal Palace. Playoff against Friedrichstad. Now, Crystal Palace, with all due respect to their opponents, are going to be strong favourites. But they need to get past Friedrichstad, because once they get through this playoff, there's two legs, home and away next week, then they'll be into the league phase, which is really important for Crystal Palace. So I think what they want to do tonight is win really, really comfortably. So then for the return leg next week, they can handle that without Eze, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the Arsenal perspective then. What about from a Spurs perspective? Because, Carver, you've just said, you know, you've already said that, you know, there's not really much more Spurs could have done. But, Jeff, for the Spurs fans, they've already lost out on Morgan Gibbs-White, who was, you know, the replacement for James Maddison's injury. Now they've lost out to Ebere Eze as well. But not only that, they've lost out to their North London rivals. So they're not going to be happy at all with this, are they? No,
I think that's the biggest thing, losing out to their rivals. You know, it's gonna sting a little bit. And now they've got to go back to the drawing board and find another replacement, really, for Maddison out for the season. So it's going to be tough for them to take.
And with that James Maddison injury, they've known for a while, Carve, that he was going to be out, did his ACL and out for a significant period of time. So could they have got this Eze deal over the line sooner? And now that they haven't, I mean, are there many options? I mean, Andy Brassel, European football expert, said earlier that maybe Brahim Diaz was an option, but it doesn't feel like there are huge names jumping out at them right now after missing out on their top 2 targets.
I think the first part of your question, could Spurs have done more? I've heard a lot of Spurs supporters say, why didn't we just trigger his release clause? Because he had a release clause until last Friday, until the Premier League season started. You could sign Eze for, I think, 60 plus 8, so a total of £68 million. So why didn't Spurs just do that? Because they've known for ages they need a replacement for James Maddison and they want the player. Why didn't they do that? If they'd done that, he'd be a Spurs player now. But we don't know exactly what Spurs did. You know, behind the scenes, Spurs may have made it clear to Crystal Palace that we are willing to trigger the release clause, but the player himself might have been saying, well, hang on a second, I'm not sure. He may have been dragging his feet because he may have known that there was a possibility that Arsenal could come in for him. And also, we don't know what the release clause exactly was. Would it have involved paying the whole sum up front? Is that why Spurs waited? Because they didn't want to do that? You know, it's not as easy. Yeah. You know, we're not playing Football Manager. This is like real life. This is like really, really complicated. These transfers are really complicated. I think the problem that Spurs had in this case is they did everything they could to sign the player, but unfortunately, the player's an Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
And if Arsenal came calling, it was always very, very likely that he would end up at Arsenal.
Yeah, and I suppose Eze probably wants to win the Premier League title sooner rather than later, and I think Arsenal are just in a better position to do that right now. But, I mean, Jeff, I want to talk to you about Richarlison because it was reported that he was included in the deal for Eze that Spurs sort of put forward. I mean, how would you have felt if that had happened to you?
If I was Richarlison?
Yeah, if you were Richarlison and he's playing well, he's keeping Dominic Solanke outside, scored a couple against Burnley, 2 very good goals.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough for him to take, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm surprised at that myself, but then yeah, you'd feel let down a little bit. Like you said, he's playing really well. I've watched him in a few games at the PSG game and all, and I think he's a fantastic player. He works hard. He scores goals, he's fit, he's strong, so I'm surprised that they were trying to put him in part of the deal. But yeah, maybe he won't be happy with that, and you know, it could cause a bit of tension, I suppose, between him and the club.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see about that. Now, European football expert Andy Brassel was our guest on Good Morning Transfers a little bit earlier this morning. He has plenty of sympathy for Spurs fans, but doubts whether Eze is enough to push Arsenal over the line in the Premier League title race.
It seems like Spurs might have been used a little bit in this. I think that always feels like that in this case. I mean, I can understand why the fans are upset, but what really more could they have done? You know, they
get it done sooner.
Well, they agreed a fee, and if the player wants to drag his feet and see what else is happening, look, we're sitting here talking, and there's 10 days left. So, you know, there's no massive rush for it to happen. I don't think the clock was working in Spurs' favour as well. Look, if he really wants to go back and lance that boil, you know, no one can stop him, and nothing that Tottenham could say really could change that, I suppose. But obviously, with what happened with Morgan Gibbs-White as well, it's incredibly frustrating. And in both cases, I don't know what Spurs could have done that differently. I guess the question is, though, I don't know what you guys think. Is he the piece? And it's a bit of a cliche.
Missing piece.
Is he the piece that pushes them over the top?
Do you think so?
No.
No.
I think he's really good to have, and I think he improves Arsenal, and I think he really helps them. But if you're asking me, does this make them title favourites? It's still a no for the moment, especially when, well, a certain centre forward we might mention who might be heading for the Northwest a little bit later on. That would shake up the picture again, wouldn't it?
So we covered Arsenal and Spurs. What about another London club in Chelsea then? Enzo Maresca has been speaking to the media this afternoon ahead of their game tomorrow night against West Ham. James Green was the man asking the questions, and we can join him live now. James, Chelsea have sold so well this summer, close to £250 million they've bought in, but they're by no means done. What has Enzo Maresca had to say on outgoings at the club?
Yeah, good afternoon. As you mentioned, they have sold so well. 11 players gone so far, close to a 12th in Renato Weiger joining Villarreal, and that will generate revenue of over £250 million. But there are plenty of players searching for a new future. Let's go through a few of them for you. Raheem Sterling, Ben Chilwell, Enzo Maresca said they're both training away from the main group as they search for solutions. With regards to Raheem Sterling, we know Fulham are interested, but a deal for the player could be really tricky. He's on big wages still at Chelsea. Christopher Nkunku was one mentioned. Maresca said he's still part of the main group, but unavailable for selection for tomorrow's game against West Ham as they seek a solution. We know RB Leipzig in talks with Chelsea over his signing. And the big one that's brought a lot of conversations around Chelsea is Nicholas Jackson. And I asked him if he is available for selection tomorrow. This is what the Chelsea manager had to say.
He is available, but he is not going to be part of the squad because, as we already said, we have two strikers, we have two players in that position, and also we know that something can happen before the window transfer close.
And is there anything on the horizon with Nicholas Jackson departing? Does he look close to a move away at the moment?
No idea, to be honest. No idea. You know already from last season that I prefer to be focused on training session, prepare the game. We see if they're gonna be here, they're gonna be with us. In case they are not here, that means that they found a solution. And at the end, I think it's always better if they can find a solution because I think they're gonna be more happy and the club the same.
So that's Nicholas Jackson. What about Wesley Fofana then? He caused a little bit of a stir yesterday with his social media, maybe unintentionally, but it led to him receiving some abuse online. What can you tell us?
Yeah, be careful what you delete on social media. You never know the outcry. Look, the context is that the player or his team deleted plenty of Chelsea posts from his Instagram yesterday, and it sparked a furor from Chelsea fans linking that potentially he's upset at things at Chelsea. Look, Enzo Maresca said, I talk to him every day. The player is very happy, which he repeated multiple times. He said after the draw with Crystal Palace on the weekend that Wesley Fofana was part of the group. He was an unused sub, but would likely get more minutes against West Ham on Friday. That's what he reiterated to us today. Now, a lot of this possibly comes from last week. I was at the press conference with Enzo Maresca. We talked about a potential replacement for Levi Colwill and whether that replacement's going to be internal or external. Well, when he talked about internal, he said, well, Tosin Adarabioyo could do that job, but others, like Wesley Fofana, potentially not. And he decided to give us an example where he played in that position, specific position of Levi Colwill's last season against Bournemouth. And he said the first 45 minutes against Bournemouth, where he played in that position, was the worst performance of the team so far that season. So it wasn't very glowing, the reference he made, but he's drawn a line over it, said, no, there's nothing going on there at all. And with regards, Olivia, the search for a potential centre-back, last week, Enzo was quite strong with me to say, external. I want a new centre-back was the message he gave me. Today, he reiterated looking at internal solutions, and he reiterated that stance over and over again. So unlikely a centre-back may come in, but as we know, it's Chelsea, and you never know. You can't count your chickens until that deadline has passed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, James. Yeah, I'd quite like Josh Achiampong to maybe be that player internally that could. But let's talk Nicholas Jackson, because training away from the team now, it looked like, you know, he was suspended for the first game of the season, but he could have been an option for this West Ham game. Have you been in a similar situation, Jeff, as a player, where you've been training apart from sort of the first team? And what's that like, if so?
Yeah, I had a couple of summers doing that. It's not ideal, but at the end of the day, you just got to, you know, stay strong mentally, get the training done. Luckily, I think there was 4 or 5 of us in the same boat where, you know, we all just sort of kept each other going and made it sort of normal as we could. But then it's sort of hard, you know, one player might have got a move earlier than others, and you're all waiting for your opportunity to get out and go and play football again. So it can be quite difficult, but like I said, my situation wasn't as bad because there was a few of us. Yeah.
Carve, Nicholas Jackson still has a lot to offer. You know, he scored 14 goals in his first Premier League season, 10 in his second, and Are there more than 1-2 Premier League clubs in for him? And do you think he will get a move before the end of the window?
I think he'll almost certainly get a move. There are 5 or 6 clubs interested in signing him. A lot of Italian clubs, Aston Villa are interested in him as well. I think what will happen is next week, after the Newcastle-Liverpool game is out of the way, there may be some developments about Isak's future. And once that is sorted out, I think we may see a sort of little bit of a domino effect. Whether Isak stays or leaves Newcastle, I think a few clubs will be making a big move for an out-and-out striker. And that's why next week Chelsea are expecting some significant bids for Nicholas Jackson. I'm not sure whether Chelsea are pushing Nicholas Jackson out of the club. He signed a new contract in September. He's got a contract until 2033. He's got 8 years left on his contract. So, just a few months ago, they were happy to extend his contract until 2033. I think the feeling is that maybe he doesn't offer as much as Liam Delap or João Pedro, but they would, if he stayed, it wouldn't be the end of the world for Chelsea. But I think the player himself wants to be the main man. And I think by Chelsea bringing in 2 strikers this summer, the message has kind of been sent to him that you're not going to be the main man. And now he's got all these other options. I think he wants to go and be the main man somewhere else. Yeah,
and Jeff, I mean, we were listening to James there talking about Enzo Maresca. There's one thing that's for sure, and that is Enzo Maresca is very honest, and he says exactly what he thinks. If you were a player and your manager came out and said, some of the things that Enzo Maresca has said about, maybe not Nicholas Jackson, but maybe let's focus on Wesley Fofana, that, when he played Levi Colwell's role, it was the worst 45 minutes that we've played. How would you feel as a player hearing that from your manager?
If I heard it face to face,
do you think he would have heard it face-to-face first, maybe?
Possibly, yeah. And you accept that, and because, it's sort of constructive criticism, would you say? But then maybe for him to come out in the media and say it, the player could be disappointed, because sometimes what is said and happens in the dressing room after a game stays there, and that's how you make things right. But then for him to come out in the media and say it will be tough for him to swallow a little bit, yeah, definitely. But I think the honesty would be appreciated for sure.
Yeah, that is for sure. That Enzo Maresca is very honest. Right, plenty more to come here on Transfer Talk. We'll have more Eze discussion. We'll be looking at the Crystal Palace side of things and how this could affect Mark Gahey's future. That's next. Welcome back. This is Douglas Luiz leaving Turin Airport this morning as the Juventus midfielder heads to Nottingham and Forest. The Brazil international is joining on a season-long loan deal with an obligation to make the move permanent should he reach a certain number of appearances. Luiz, of course, returns to the Premier League just a year after leaving Aston Villa for Juve. We'll touch on Forest a little bit later on in the show and the brilliant summer that they have had. What a signing that is. Well, it's been a tricky summer for Crystal Palace after losing their legal case and then being relegated to the UEFA Conference League, and now they're facing the possibility of losing two of their key players as Eze looks set to be off to Arsenal, whilst Mark Gahey has been linked with a move away with only 1 year left on his deal. Let's start off with the Palace and Eze part of this then, Carve. And I suppose, did Palace need to sell Eze? Were they in a position where they needed to?
Good question. Palace have just won the FA Cup. They won the Community Shield as well. They're almost certainly going to be in Europe this season. Unfortunately for them, they're not in the Europa League. But I think financially, every summer, Palace do need to sell a player. Last summer, they sold Michael Elise to Bayern Munich. This summer, they're going to sell at least Eberechi Eze. But the question is, do they really need to do that? I think financially, if you're their accountant or their banker, you would say, yes, they do need to do it. But I thought there was a really good column by Martin Samuel in the Times yesterday. And he made the point that surely it's now time for a club like Crystal Palace to look up instead of looking down, instead of looking over their shoulders and worrying about maybe, being involved in a relegation scrap. They've won the FA Cup. They should build to become bigger and better. And he was making the point that if, for instance, they were run by Evangelos Marinakis, who's in charge of Nottingham Forest, he would not let Eberechi Eze leave Crystal Palace. He wouldn't leave any of his best players leave, and he would be a lot more ambitious. But I think, of course, Mr. Marinakis is not very popular with Crystal Palace fans at the moment, so I'm not sure whether we should be talking about the two of them in the same breath. But I thought he was making an interesting point. And Crystal Palace are owned by some very, very rich American businessmen, I think like at least 2 or 3 billionaires, and Steve Parish as well. But on the other hand, they are very, very well run by Steve Parish. They're very, very carefully run, and they have a business model. And the business model, unfortunately, involves losing players like Eze and Michael Elise. The big question now is whether they can hold on to Mark Gahey.
The one thing is for sure, Jeff, and that is that Eze in the whole of this has been the ultimate professional. And I suppose, do you think for him, maybe he will want to say goodbye to those Palace fans? Spent 5 years at the club. Obviously, the game tonight, which we've spoken about in the Conference League, is the chance for him to say goodbye. And is that important from your perspective as a player to maybe get to say that to the fans?
I think he wants to say goodbye to them. He's had a fantastic 5 years at the club. They basically took the chance on him. Bringing him from the Championship into the Premier League. He's won silverware. He's got into the national team off the back of that, and he's probably enjoyed himself so much there, and he'll have great memories of the club. And now it's time for him to move on and better himself. Like we always say, there's not long in this career, so it's a great opportunity for him. But yeah, I think he want to go out in style. Hopefully, get Crystal Palace through into the league version of the European football and give the fans a wave and a good send-off.
We're going to touch on Alexander Isak in just a second, obviously, your former club. But I suppose there are significant differences in the way that Alexander Isak has handled that situation at Newcastle compared to the way Eberechi Eze has handled it at Crystal Palace. And one of them has currently got their move. Do you think the way that you act as a player affects the potential of a transfer, or how quickly it maybe happens? Possibly,
yeah. Obviously, he's acted in such a good way, but he must have a good relationship with people behind the scenes, and they've probably been open and honest with each other from day one. And you see that Tottenham, Arsenal both have came in, and they don't want to stand in his way, even though potentially they probably want him to stay. They've come out and said they don't want to lose him and Mark Gahey. So for me, he's probably done it in the right way. He's stayed fit. He's had a good pre-season, and now if he goes into Arsenal, he goes in fit, healthy, strong, and ready to play straight away. And then you look at other players, possibly will be a good bit behind the curve, and it could be detrimental to their season.
Yeah, and you've mentioned obviously Mark Gahey there as well, might be on his way out of Crystal Palace like Eze, but do the club have a big decision to make on him this summer?
Well, I think they're going to wait until tonight's game is out of the way. We know that they were prepared to sell Eze, but they wanted him to potentially play tonight. I think it's the same situation with Mark Gahey. Let's get tonight's game out of the way, see if Liverpool come back in for him, see if other clubs come in for him. His decision is also really, really important, because he could say, look, I just want to stay at Crystal Palace. I don't want to leave now. I want to leave on a free transfer next summer. But Steve Parish has said that is not really acceptable from Crystal Palace's point of view. But I think it's really up to Liverpool now, because there's still a gap in valuation between the two sides. I was told that even though he's got a year left on his contract, Palace value him at a number beginning with a 4. Now, are Liverpool going to pay more than £40 million for a player they can get for nothing next summer? I'm not so sure. But I think, first of all, tonight's game out of the way, then there could be developments with Mark Gahey over the next few days.
Yeah, I wonder if Crystal Palace will lose both of them this summer. Well, Alexander Isak has been the talk of the summer, hasn't he? And he is adamant he wants to leave Newcastle. We'll be getting Jeff's thoughts on that one after the break. Plus, we look ahead to that tantalising Monday night football. Welcome back. Time now for our transfer update. Arsenal have stunned their rivals Tottenham by agreeing a £16 million deal with a further £7.5 million in add-ons for that man, Ebere Eze. Well, Palace look to have their replacement lined up as they're close to completing a £32 million deal for Bilal El Khanous from Leicester. And that may not be all. Palace are also weighing up a move for Southampton teen star Tyler Dibling. Well, just this morning, Bournemouth have completed a £25 million deal for Leverkusen winger Amin Adli. And Douglas Luiz is currently in transit to the UK to complete his medical at Nottingham Forest as they close in on a loan deal with a potential option to buy. Well, Alexander Isak reported to Newcastle's training ground yesterday afternoon as he seeks a resolution to his future. But the club have hit a stumbling block in their pursuit of a replacement as their £40 million bid for Wissa has been rejected by Brentford. Nicholas Jackson will be watching this one closely too as Enzo Maresca confirms he is no longer training with the first team squad at Chelsea. Another forward who could be on the move is Rasmus Højlund. Napoli are pushing to complete a loan deal for him. His Manchester United teammate Alejandro Garnacho is the subject of an approach from Chelsea with active discussions ongoing between the two clubs. And Chelsea are close to a £26 million deal with Villarreal for the sale of Renato Vega, which will take them well over £200 million in sales this summer. Well, don't forget you can keep across all the latest information as it happens on our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. All you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen right now. Well, Ebere Eze might have become the most exciting move of the summer, but the one that has dominated the headlines all summer long has been Alexander Isak. He reported to Newcastle's training ground yesterday, just hours after his stunning statement on social media, where he stated that trust had been broken and the relationship could not continue. Carve, right, we know Isak's on strike. We know him and the club have made completely opposing statements. But with this one, do we maybe expect things to change and maybe move further forward after the Monday Night Football?
Well, look, if he's going to get his dream move, a couple of things need to happen. First of all, Newcastle need to sign at least one replacement. And then Liverpool need to make an offer that's closer to Newcastle United's valuation. So lots of things need to happen before he moves to Liverpool. I still think it's much more likely that he stays at Newcastle. But if something's going to happen, the conspiracy theorists will tell you that it will happen on Tuesday. And the reason it'll happen on Tuesday is because Newcastle are paying Liverpool on Monday. So nothing's going to happen before then. So I think if something is going to happen, if Liverpool are going to come back in for him, if Newcastle are going to make a serious move for a replacement for him, it will be on Tuesday.
We're all looking forward to the Monday Night Football, aren't we? Newcastle against Liverpool. Jeff, as a former Newcastle player, what did you make of Isak's statement one and the way he sort of acted in this whole process?
His statement took me by surprise a little bit. But for me, it's possibly he thinks that's the only thing he could have done. He had to, say his piece. Like he said, he said he stayed quiet and that was the right time for him to make that statement. And then, I just think it's a tricky situation. I don't think it depends what side of the fence you're on here, but I don't think club or player will sort of come out of this looking well. And it's difficult. He's made it clear he wants out of the club and he wants to move on. He said there's no going back. Newcastle are saying there is a way back. We still want him to be there. So it's really tricky. And, I think as time goes on, he probably will get his move. It's unfortunate because he has been brilliant at the club. The fans love him. Obviously, now they probably don't. But I've seen certain people say, like, if he just gets back on the pitch and scores goals, they'll welcome him back in. So I think that's what the locals are hoping for.
Carve, obviously, really it's only Liverpool. It's Liverpool or nothing, Liverpool or Newcastle for Alexander Isak. And obviously plenty of people speculating about, them spending a British record fee to sign Alexander Isak. But, they can definitely afford it, can't they?
Certainly, because Liverpool, like Chelsea, are very good at selling players as well. They have raised so much money from selling players. this summer. You can look at a list there. Ben Doak, somebody who's played very, very few games for them. They still managed to get £25 million. Darwin Núñez, I mean, not a lot of people were expecting anybody to pay that much for him, but they got Al Hilal to pay more than £50 million. Luis Diaz going to Bayern Munich for a big, big fee as well. Gerald Quansah, £35 million to Bayer Leverkusen. So Liverpool have done very, very well selling players. And another reason why they've had so much money to spend this summer is because they didn't spend anything last summer. And also commercially, they're one of the biggest clubs in the world. And when you generate more money, you have more money to spend on transfers.
I mean, you see obviously all that money that they've bought in, Jeff, this summer, but really their only number 9 currently is Hugo Ekitike. And don't get me wrong, you know, he's had a brilliant start to life at Anfield. You know, he looks a brilliant signing. But do you feel like they need an Alexander Isak?
Yeah, I do. They've lost 3 attacking players in the summer, and they need to replace them. And I think Isak has been the target for such a long time. He wants to go there, they want him, and I think he'd be a great addition to them. Like I said, they have Ekitike, and you know, Gakpo can come inside, and they have, you know, numerous attacking options, but that is sort of the last piece of the puzzle that they want for their attacking players.
Yeah, cool. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Hugo Ekitike and Alexander Isak up top for Liverpool. Well, up next for Newcastle are none other than the Reds. It's going to be a blockbuster Monday Night Football. You're not going to want to miss it. And you can, of course, watch it all on Sky Sports Premier League from 6:30. Well, there's still plenty more to come here on Transfer Talk. We've talked Isak. What about a replacement? We'll focus on Johan Wissa next. Plus, we'll have the latest from Manchester United. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. We've spoken about Alexander Isak, but how about potential incomings at Newcastle? They have had a deal worth £40 million rejected by Brentford for Yoane Wissa. And I suppose, Carve, all this talk about Wissa, and we're talking about, what happens if Alexander Isak stays at Newcastle, what has to happen there? What has to happen if Yoane Wissa is to stay at Brentford?
Well, I think he's really, really desperate to move to Newcastle. I think behind the scenes he's doing whatever he can to try and force Brentford to sell him to Newcastle. But so far, Newcastle haven't offered enough. The latest bid they made was rejected yesterday. I think it was around 35 million plus some add-ons, which were difficult to achieve. So it is stalemate at the moment, but I don't think he's going to play for Brentford again, but Brentford have been very, very firm in their stance that he's got a year left on his contract plus an option of another year. And unless they get what they want from Newcastle or any other club, he's not going to leave. And it's important to stay as well that Brentford haven't placed a valuation on his head. There have been some reports that maybe they're asking for this much or this much. That's not the case. They haven't let that figure be known. But obviously 35 plus 5 is not enough for them.
Yeah, I wonder what will be enough for Brentford to accept that deal from Newcastle. Now, Jeff, you've actually played under Keith Andrews, obviously the Brentford manager. I mean, it's a tough start, isn't it? You've lost Mbumo and now you're potentially losing Wissa as well, or having to deal with that situation. How tough is that going to have been for him?
Yeah, I think it's very tough. The two standout players for them last year, really. And to lose both of them in the same window would be tough. It's probably been hard for him as well. If you think about doing the full pre-season without Wissa, has been probably challenging for him, having to keep coming out and answer questions on the topic. And when he really wants to just implement his style on the team and get them ready for football matches. So it's definitely been tough. But I'm sure he's enthusiastic. He'll be upbeat going into the building every day and getting the players ready and forming good relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's talk Manchester United now. Napoli are pushing for the loan signing of Rasmus Højlund, according to Sky in Italy. That's after AC Milan could not convince Højlund to join them under the terms of the deal on offer. Milan wanted a loan with an option, while Højlund and United's preference was a permanent deal. European football expert Andy Brassel is convinced a loan would be best for all parties.
It's a good profile of league to reinflate a player's value. And that is exactly the spot that Højlund's in at the moment. If you look at the players who've come out of difficult times, not just English players who've come out of difficult times in the Premier League to do really well there. Look at Scott McTominay's image now. He's on the Ballon d'Or list. And go before that, you go Lukaku, Smalling, Young. You can go through them all, and they've reignited their careers there. Now, look, I think Højlund and United, if that is really their view, that they want a permanent deal, well, I'd love a Lamborghini, but it's not going to happen. The fact is that his value has dropped so much over the last 2 years. The best thing for him and for United is to loan him out and get him to a point where he's sellable. At the moment, he is not sellable for anything near what they paid for him. Even if you're taking off the bits for amortisation, it's just not worth their while. I don't see how they can get a reasonable deal for him.
So Andy Brassel thinks a loan is suited to all parties, but why, Carve, do Manchester United not want to do a loan here?
Well, because they spent £72 million on him 2 years ago. And on paper, it makes sense to send a player out on loan, because the thinking is you get him off your wage bill, he goes out on loan, he does well. If he does well, that puts him in the shop window, that increases his value, and then next summer you can sell him. But it doesn't always turn out like that, because the flip side of that is these players on big wages, I'm not saying that he necessarily is on big wages, but we've seen other players who just get on the sort of loan merry-go-round, where every transfer window they're going out on loan somewhere and the club who's taking them is paying a proportion of their wages, but in actual fact the club who own them can't actually sell them. For instance, the situation with Anthony, he played really well at Real Betis, but he's still a Manchester United player. Jadon Sancho did pretty well at Chelsea. No one's really come in for him on a massive permanent deal. It's just more loans the whole time. So I can see from United's perspective why in an ideal world they would want a permanent deal, but some of these clubs, especially like Italian clubs, are much more interested in trying to do a good deal and get a loan plus an option and, you know, try their luck in the transfer market.
Yeah, Jeff, surely like Manchester United don't want to be in a position where you've got, especially those three players, Højlund, Sancho and Anthony, that aren't going to be playing football. They're just going to be left there on huge wages. So surely they've got to make a decision sooner rather than later. And if they may have to just compromise and send them out on loan if clubs are offering that.
Yeah, if it's not the right time to sell, I think loan is definitely the right option, and it gets the players out maybe for a year. Like you said, having them coming into the training ground or coming in at different times, maybe to when the squad is there, it's just messy. And for me, I think just let them go out and play football. They might have a good year, and it might be a better option to sell them next year.
Jadon Sancho's played his best football abroad, there's no doubt about that, and it feels like that's the most likely place for him to go, but feels like he's just holding out for a club that's going to pay his really high wages.
I think, you know, the move has to be right for Jadon Sancho. A couple of clubs have come in for him. He hasn't felt like it's the right move at this stage of his career. There's talk that he may want to go back to Borussia Dortmund and they might try and make a move for him. Fenerbahce were interested in him. The one that's really intriguing for me is Roma. I mean, Roma want to take him. Why wouldn't you want to go and live and work and play in that stadium and for those fans? But something will happen certainly with Jadon Sancho over the next few days. I think clubs who are interested will kind of be playing poker because they know the closer it gets to deadline day, the better deal potentially they can get out of Manchester United.
Yeah, and talking of, I suppose, outgoings and incomings at Manchester United, they have recruited well, Jeff, but do you think they still need a perhaps goalkeeper and a midfielder maybe?
Yeah, exactly the two positions I was going to say. Yeah, I think midfield, visually on the eye, watching the game the weekend just gone, I think they need legs in that midfield, just to help out. And then, like we seen with the goal, wouldn't be too convinced with the goalkeeper. Maybe you want someone coming in who's a bit commanding, and it sort of gives the defence that confidence behind them. So they're definitely the two positions, I think, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gianluigi Donnarumma, we do know, is a goalkeeper that is on the market. So could he be on his way to Manchester? But might it be City and not United? We will find out as the transfer window carries on. Right, Good Morning Transfers returns tomorrow at 9 a.m. We're back for Transfer Talk at midday tomorrow as well. And the Transfer Show returns at 4 and 7 p.m. a little bit later on today. A huge thank you to Jeff Hendrick and to Kaveh Solakul as well. Coming up after the break, we'll have plenty more on Eberechi as he moves to Arsenal.